Let's kick off in India with India's leading energy commentator, Narendra Taneja. Narendra, your general thoughts on the deal and what it means about less oil arriving in India from Russia?
Well, as you know, they announced both by American president and Indian prime minister, an agreement has been reached, and the formal trade deal should be in place as soon as possible. But it appears that, most of the issues have now been resolved, and America has agreed to reduce tariff to 18%, in Indian exports, which is okay, which is fine. It's still more than what it used to be, but it's fine. I mean, it's lower than Bangladesh or Vietnam or Thailand and other countries. And but as far as oil imports from Russia are concerned, we have seen that tweet and statement from the U.S. But there is no such statement from the side of India. And I think it's a bilateral deal. It's more about India and US. It's not about India and country X or country Y. But President Trump has mentioned it. And of course, India is going to go for some recalibration in terms of, oil imports from different geographies. But to say that, India would agree to basically bring down its import from zero looks a little bit unrealistic because India has always been importing oil from Russia. Before Ukraine, it was like 2%. In the 17, it was slightly more. That time, oil mostly was physically supplied by Iraq, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, though the agreement was between India and at that time Soviet Union. But as I said, there is no such word from the Indian side. The deal is between India and the US. It's not about Russia. It's not about China. It's not about any third country.
In terms of obviously oil has grabbed the headlines because inevitably that's what the president of the United States focused on. That because this is not new, this has been said before that India would give up the Russian oil imports that was stated a few months ago. And I think progressively India has given up some of that for multiple reasons, as you say, diversification, if nothing else. But just in terms of the trade deal, is there anything in it that is noteworthy beyond the energy point? I know that, for example, the US seemed to be quite keen to get their agricultural products into India, challenging the sort of dairy industry within India. What is of noteworthy for, I mean, the headline 18%, but any granular insight on what that means for specific industries?
Well, we have to wait for the details, but in terms of India has been agriculture and dairy, India has been very clear with two things. First of all, dairy is a very important, domestic component of domestic demand. And the second is, of course, agriculture. There, India particularly has been very opposed to importing genetically modified, producers because we don't allow that, GM products or producers in India. So India has been very clear. But then the US has been suggesting, why don't you import some, maize from us or some soya bean and use it for making ethanol or other products, such products. So that has been under consideration. But as far as opening up Indian agriculture sector, where 75% farmers are actually, they're very small farmers and they are very vulnerable. So the government needs to protect them because it's politically extremely sensitive. I would be very surprised if India has agreed to any kind of opening up agriculture sector very comprehensively. Strategically, is a different story that you say, all right, we buy, soybean or corn worth $10 billion and we use it to produce ethanol, or you do that in the US, we import for ethanol from you. Those kind of arrangements are possible. But any kind of flat, opening up, I don't think it's likely to happen. The same with the Russian oil. Given the public sentiments about Russia and all that, I think this is not going to be part of the deal. But at the same time, recalibration in terms of importing more oil from the United States or from Venezuela and other countries, well, it's business, it's economics. We are very unsentimental about these things.
Narendra, looking more closer to home here, you're obviously one of the great geostrategic analysts of our east of Suez Asia environment. We are sitting on the doorstep of the last. We went from obviously the sort of Greenland episode in the Trump show to now the Iran episode. And it seems to be losing a little bit of momentum, a bit like Greenland did as well. Your thoughts on the outlook for a US unprovoked attack on Iran? Last time, a year ago, last June, they joined an Israeli attack on Iran. This time, it looks, at least from the headlines, that the US is considering an individual attack on Iran if they don't behave as Washington wants. What's your thoughts on that, as the outlook for that, and what's at stake here?
Well, it's an interesting question. As you know, that in New Delhi just hosted, Arab foreign ministers meet just 2 days ago, and this was very high on the agenda. As a point of discussion, India is of course very worried about any kind of military intervention by the United States, or for that matter, Israel, that leads to a kind of regional conflict involving Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other oil exporting countries, and at Iran's attempt, at least, to mine or block, Strait of Hormuz. That would be a disastrous news for us and for most other countries. But so there have been kind of discussions between India and India and Saudi Arabia, India and UAE, and also with India and Iran, that how can we kind of find a solution so that this doesn't escalate. But at the same time, we know that my own sense is that America is not going to use military power in any hurry, unless they are quite confident the situation on the ground in Iran is ripe for a kind of regime change. That if they use air power, that would basically create a kind of internal situation where the people will come out on the street and go and seize the power. But my own sense is I don't think that is the case on the ground in Iran yet. Because if they go for unprovoked and they go for a kind of partial attack and they achieve partial success, that will only unite the Iranians, because Iranian nationalism is well known. And any kind of attack from the West, particularly from the US, would only unite these forces. And the current regime would be the beneficiary of it. But then there is a kind of dark spot there, and that is Israel. We don't know the relationship that Israeli Prime Minister in particular has with the President Trump, and the kind of influence he and the whole apparatus in Tel Aviv has in Washington, D.C. If they prevail, and they always create a kind of situation where America gets into it kind of almost, at night and without really thinking much about it, then I think that the consequences can be disastrous, because it would lead to kind of escalation, a major escalation. It may be easy to start, but it may be very difficult to really contain. So my own sense is all countries are basically putting pressure on the US, having conversation, don't go for it, it's not good for you. And most particularly countries like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, they made it very clear they will not allow their airspace to be used by American forces. And the same other countries have more or less conveyed the same thing. So my own sense is we don't know what is happening between on the secret lines between Tel Aviv and Washington D.C. We don't have much. But
Yeah.
if they prevail, things might go wrong in the wrong direction. But my own sense is that President Trump wants to, but at the same time he knows once he looks at the consequences, I think he's not able to kind of mobilize courage that you need in order to go for that direction.
Narendra, looking at the outlook for the global economy, the sort of global picture for 2026, that despite the sort of, and you're obviously exhibit A of the trauma of the Trumpian Liberation Day, the tariffs, the sanctions in different places, the threats, etc. Asia has taken the blows pretty well and continues to grow and continues to perform. India, case in point. Your thoughts a year in as we look to year two of this sort of Trumpian turmoil, but yet the ability to absorb it and keep performing and keep economically advancing looks like India and Asia has figured that out, or is that a misreading? What are your thoughts of that? Looking
Well, I
forward.
think no, I don't think it's a misreading. Let me give you an example of India, for instance, what the US president has been trying to do, kind of treating India like some small country on some other planet. And the result is there for everybody to see. India's response was very
Treating it
mature.
like Ireland, a little place with
Exactly.
a few
Yeah.
people.
Exactly. And so the India's response was we studied it very carefully and we said, fine, we decided to adopt the strategy called strategic silence. So not to react, not to respond to his tweets. And basically, in most cases, just stay silent. We are master of that craft called silence. I mean, think of Buddha, think of Gandhi. So, and that frustrated Trump because he didn't like it. He wanted India to react, and as violently as he did sometime in terms of the words that he used, like calling Indian economy dead and so on and so forth. But one thing is clear at the same time, for us, it was important to continue to deal with the US because US is a strategic partner, and India-US relationship is not only about trade. Trade is one part. But it's a multi-layered relationship and it's doing very well because very institutionalized the past 25 years. The same, if you look at very carefully, goes for our relations with number of other countries. So I think when you look at Asia as a whole, what America, whether President Trump may want or may not, what America has to make sure that China is kept, kind of within this region. If China's influence grows outside Asia, is going to be trouble for the U.S. And for that, the U.S. needs India. They can't do it without India.
Well, it
And as
does look like one of the outcomes. I mean, as we say, the economic well-being of Asia and India has survived this year one of Trump. But ultimately, you would say the big winner has been China. We've saw the Keir Starmer there last week, Mark Carney. The list of people running to China for trade arrangements seems to be long. And China, again, similar as you're articulating, we know to be silent and be patient. China is being both, and the world is coming to them. Your thoughts of China being a big winner here in Trump
Oh,
2.0?
absolutely. If you really have to kind of go for a more layman analysis and say, all right, what the President Trump has been trying to do the last 13 months, who has been the number one frontline main beneficiary is People's Republic of China. And without any efforts, they are happy, very, very happy about it. And even if you look at Ukraine, whatever is happening in peace talks over Ukraine, unless China is on board, there's going to be no peace in Ukraine because Ukraine, China is a big force behind what Russia does and Russia thinks. If China is not, with on the for peace in Ukraine is not going to happen. So therefore, I think China's influence overall has grown, including in the region we call Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific, and that's a worry. There should be worry for President Trump. And that's a worry for many countries like Japan, Korea, India, Australia, most ASEAN countries, and most particularly, of course, Taiwan. But this is what he has delivered. But I just hope now with this trade deal with India, that's kind of at least as far as India's concerned is put to rest, and India and the America can work together in Quad and kind of on this region in a more strategic manner. But we don't know. I mean, the agreement has been reached, it has been announced. We are still waiting for the formal agreement on the table so that we can look into the details. We can, because devil is always in details. And number two, the question is that would there be kind of, as far as the implementation part, it is important that President Trump remains consistent on that. If that happens, that's going to be because India is focused on the US on three areas. We need American technology, we need American market, and then at the same time we need American investment. And America needs India in order to deal with this China policy if they have any China policy anymore. So that's the kind of landscape. But at the same time, just
But I
give you
mean,
one.
when you look at that point, what are your thoughts on the Mark Carney statement or speech in Davos? He's saying this kind of framework of the world is over. That this is a rupture. Trump has said clearly he wants the Western Hemisphere, signaling that China can have the Eastern Hemisphere.
Well, I think I agree with Canadian Prime Minister, and the same sentiments were repeated by German Chancellor in Bundestag in a German Parliament. He went even beyond it. I think that's the reality. What the Canadian Prime Minister has said is really the fact of the story. And what the Chancellor of Germany is saying, fact of the story. And we have been saying it for a long time, and I've been saying this on your show for a long time. Now, the question here is that, to say that is mean America handing over Eastern Hemisphere to China, there is no truth in it. America is not in a position to do that. America continue to be a big power, the biggest power. China will need at least another 25 years to catch up with the United States, because it's not only about economy. When you say superpower, it's not only about economic power. It's about many other things. And China is still not there. You just can't be there unless you are an open economy and you're an open society.